In this video, we're going to go a little bit deeper into the next level asset protection strategies, equity stripping and leasing your properties to your business. Easiest way to explain this is through a question submitted by one of the subscribers. I own 2 homes that I have a lot of equity in. I would like to protect them. What is the best vehicle to own these properties? An LLC, a C Corp? And in a business that owns properties and future purchases of property, I heard Ken mention he sets up LLCs on each property and they all roll up to one. Do you recommend this strategy? This is a great question, and it's actually a two-parter, right? The first one is, how do you structure your properties that have a lot of equity? And then the second one is, how do you actually structure when your business has property? So let's go to the first one. The subscriber mentioned that he has 2 properties with a lot of equity in them. I'm going to assume for this purpose, it's $500,000 each. Maybe, they're worth $1 million. He's got $500,000 in debt in the mortgage. So what's left over is $500,000, which is his equity. Now, the subscriber asked whether these should be set up in an LLC or a C Corp. I almost never say never, but when it comes to real estate, you really should never, ever hold your real estate in a C Corp because of the double taxation issues. In a C Corp, you get taxed at the corporate level, and then once you make a distribution yourself, you get taxed again. So in our first example, we don't want to hold them in our personal names because if something were to happen to this person, then this creditor can actually reach the equity in these properties. So we want to make sure that we put these properties in their own LLCs. Now, with this much equity, I would definitely recommend having each of the properties in their own LLC that then rolls up into either the individual owning these LLCs, or maybe we can set up a holding company. I've done a couple of videos on holding companies. I encourage you to check those out. The challenge that you have with this sort of asset protection 101, sort of your basic asset protection, is that, remember from my prior videos, even if there's a judgment against the individual, they can get whatever's inside the LLC. And in this case, what's inside is a property that has $500,000 in equity. That's a lot of equity. And if they can get to both of these, that's $1 million worth of equity that somebody can still obtain even though they're inside their LLC. So this is where the asset protection 202, or the advanced level of asset protection, and what we call this is equity stripping. So in this strategy, what you want to do is you want to create a separate LLC, probably in a state like Wyoming or maybe Nevada or Delaware, but a really good asset protection state. And we want to do is actually create a lien, almost like a second mortgage. Think of this as sort of a second mortgage on your property. So this LLC is actually acting more like a bank. So in this example, for example, we had $500,000 in debt, and that was from Bank of America, Wells Fargo. That's your mortgage broker. But this is almost like getting a line of credit, right? You go to a bank and you try and get a second line of credit to take some of that equity out. In this specific strategy, you're taking it out to your own LLC. What we're essentially doing is moving this equity from the property LLC to this LLC. And I'm going to explain to you how that actually happens. So what this LLC is actually do is actually going to give your property LLCs either a loan or a line of credit. And for this particular example, let's just say this is a $500,000 loan. And so in exchange for the loan, just like a bank, when this LLC loans money to this LLC or provides it with a line of credit, this LLC is going to come in here and have a second lien on the property. So the end result is as follows. You still have your $500,000 debt from your mortgage lender, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. But now we have another $500,000 debt from your LLC, your lending LLC up here. So the end result is you have 0 equity in this property. So when a plaintiff's lawyer or somebody thinking about coming after you, remember the first thing they're going to do is they're going to do an asset search. They're going to find this property. It's owned by you. They're going to look to see if there's any equity, and what they're going to find on the public records is that it's worth $1 million, but Wells Fargo has a first mortgage for $500,000, and this other entity that they have no idea who they are has a second mortgage for another $500,000, so there's no actual equity in the property. This is what we get referred to as equity stripping. It really discourages plaintiffs' lawyers from going after your properties because there's nothing there to get. A similar strategy happens when you have a business that owns property. One of the things we try and avoid is having an active business really own any assets, right? And certainly not real estate, because the business is a very liability producing entity, right? Businesses are always getting sued. And so again, if the business gets sued, whether this is an LLC or corporation, if it owns a property, that's going to be available for a creditor. So what we want to do is we actually want to create an LLC over here that, again, that you own. And we basically want to transfer this property from the business over to this new property LLC. So now, because the business still needs to use it, what we're going to do is we're going to actually lease this property to your business. So there's actually going to be a lease arrangement, just like any other, like you're a tenant, where the business now becomes a tenant of that property but doesn't own it. The reason for that is, again, if we have a lawsuit against the business and there's a judgment for $1 million or $5 million, the business doesn't own the real estate. They can't come after the real estate because they don't own it. It's just like if you were a tenant in another building, your property is safely tucked away here in another LLC that you own. So it's very, very important from an asset protection standpoint to separate your liability producing entities from your asset entities. And this is a classic example where you want to have your business in one entity and your property in a separate.